are we going to discuss? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw. Congrats to him. Mm. Yeah, it would be a conflict of interest. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Mm. The gaming companies. The gaming companies too. Yeah. Gotcha.
That
Mm.
was quite the thing to hop into. I was like, oh, right, this is how we're starting. Here, let's retry that. Hmm. Just, uh, like, why? Well, no, Shay and I have done content together before.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's been a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, it was one of the Why We Geek episodes, but I can't remember what the conversation was about. I mean, this was like back in 2019, so it's not even worth thinking.
It does. Mm.
I like I watched most of the esports from Blizzard. I I watched so I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I saw the inaugural season of the Overwatch League until my team was like they lost enough games where they didn't make it to the playoffs. And at that point I stopped watching. Typical of like sports fans who are like, "Oh, my team is not in the playoffs." So I'm well, yes, particularly Jazz fans of Salt Lake City, Utah. Yes. Um whereas with American football, it's well, my team's not in the playoffs, but I might as well see who's going to make it to the Super Bowl, and then the Super Bowl is the big thing. Um,
Yeah.
so what? Remind me about controllers faking. I've heard of the term, but just like in so many words because it's almost 5 o'clock. Okay, I'm gonna leave my initial thoughts for the meat of the conversation. But thank you for. I
Yeah,
was
thank
thinking.
you for clarifying that.
I was. I was thinking. So probably not. I wouldn't be surprised if the Blizzard announcements get absorbed into E3 moving forward. That's one of my favorite things I did when I went to BlizzCon in 2016 was watch the final of the Overwatch tournament that was there. And I watched Heroes of the Storm. Um, the, I was actually half tempted to like. Well, I guess my old Blizzard account I lost because I don't have that email anymore, and I had to start a new one. Or I was like half tempted to jump back into it again. Um, Heroes. I play Overwatch on and off. I'm not 100% sure if I want to play Overwatch 2 yet, but that's not a concern of Brinton today. That would be a
Yes, very much so.
by 2 minutes.
Oh, by 2 minutes. Yes, I know. Well, at least it's not like with Romney where it'd be 20 minutes over. And yes, we had conversations that went well over that. You know we
Oh,
did.
it super happens.
I miss Romney, but, he's off doing great things. Welcome, everybody, to kind of the pre-show. I'm just making sure that everybody else can enjoy this, but we are going to be going over a roundtable discussion on esports. So look forward to that. As I guess we'll just run right into it, and you guys can join in with the live chat. But really quick heading, we are not on Twitch tonight. Twitch does not like my podcasts. I don't know why. It's just they've never done that great on Twitch. So we're gonna try just doing this on YouTube and letting it stay here because people scream at me all the time that I don't do enough YouTube exclusive content anymore. So there you go. I'm fixing it, everyone.
Oh my lord.
I know, right? Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek. For the week of March 11th, I believe, would be Friday. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drak, but as you guys are already noticing, we are recording on Sunday, and instead of talking the week's events in Geek, we actually have a very interesting discussion that has been a year and a half in the making, I want to say, because the request actually came in like halfway into 2020. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce my panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow content creators, fellow awesome people in general. And joining us tonight is Brinton Volley. Brinton, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great. Can't complain.
Yes. I'm very happy about that. And then joining us is returning guest, Shay Terry, for the first time in 2022. Shay, how are you?
I'm doing good. Kind of sleepy, but
Okay.
I'm doing good.
Yes. Well, especially considering you are how many months away from wedding bells? And
Was this March?
like,
So,
yeah. So really quick, has any of that started yet for you?
like
The preparations for it.
oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
like we already booked all of our vendors like last year, so
Nice.
sent out save the dates.
Good for you too.
Yeah, so we're ahead of the game, but I'm
All
also
right.
in a wedding next month, so
Oh, so not only do you have your own wedding, but you're going to be part of the wedding party of another wedding.
of two.
Of two of them.
One is next month, one's in November. I'm a maid of honor in one and a bridesmaid in another.
Wow. So what dress fitting is just going to be what you do this year?
I guess. Oh, I already have my maid of honor dress.
Okay.
So thankfully actually it's my best friend, so we're actually the maid of honor in each other's weddings. So
Oh, I like that.
yeah, so she's my best friend. So I already have my dress. So yeah, she already told us like what color she wanted us to buy, and she said the dress could be any style as long as it was just long. But
Hopefully it's not the
already-
stereotype of like the really weird color, right?
No, it's like a lavender.
Because that was a big thing in our wedding. I don't know if you even dealt with this, Brinton, because I remember there were some people in Texas that had unique colors, but for ours, my sister and my sister-in-law got brought into the bride's part of the wedding party, and immediately that was their question: "You're not going to put us in a weird hot pink, are you?" And they were legitimately worried about that for the longest time, and thankfully it never happened. But
No weird colors.
good.
Thankfully, don't have to worry about that one. But even so, all I can say is if a bride does it, it's like that's what the bride wants.
Yeah, no. And now you've also probably kind of realized that as much as a wedding is about the bride, it is much more about the bride's mother. This was something that I had to learn with our wedding quite a bit. Is that Andrea? Yeah, she got to make decisions, and those still stuck through. But one thing I learned was like the week of that is the bride's mom, like that is all them, and they get whatever they want out of that. And
We'll see what happens with my mom as we get closer. So far, my mom's been pretty chill about everything.
That's good.
She's been enjoying the process.
Okay, all right. Just curious, are you the only daughter, or do you have sisters?
I'm the only daughter.
Wow. Okay.
I have two step-siblings, two step-sisters. But as far as like biological siblings, all I have is an older brother.
Okay. Well, there you go, because that'll also play into the equation. It did with my wife as well. But we're not here talking about weddings and such. We are here talking about a discussion that I am thoroughly convinced and have no evidence of came from Shay Taree's audience. because it was specifically requested that Shay be part of that. And part of that, I think, is because I even tried to look back into your backlog to see if maybe you had talked about this in a vlog or something like that. I couldn't find one, but if there is one, Shay, you'll have to let me know. But basically, your opinion on esports, since you had been doing a lot of, I want to say joined a podcast, but you had joined us on a couple of episodes where you were talking to gamers that did talk esports and had a love for it. And so in specific, they wanted to know your take on some of those discussions. So that's why this happened. And originally it was Stephen Romney that was going to join us, but he had things happen. And now I actually think we have a little bit more of a veteran of esports in Brinton, because even Romney had to admit he was very picky with the esports that he watched, and he only watched specific things at specific times because of his schedule. Whereas Brinton, you've watched an entire season of the Overwatch League. You've taken advantage of quite a bit of that. And your ex-husband now, but your husband at the time was an avid game player, and I remember having discussions with him about esports and how they were a cool thing for him. Primarily because this is kind of like a gamer's version of the Super Bowl. It's a gamer's version of Monday Night Football. Because it's something that we can get excited. But that being said, let's get into this. So, we're talking esports, and I think that this is especially appropriate considering that the pandemic was not kind to esports. The last 2 years have been a very tumultuous time for esports in a variety of genres, and a lot of them have had to adapt to react to that. And so that's going to be kind of the crux of this conversation, is what they've had to do, what they've had to endure, but also talking about their future and stating, like, in order to be able to be as popular as the NBA, the NFL, MLB, all of those, like, what they're going to have to do to bring in somebody like Shay, who I know that some people will call a filthy casual, but I mean, she plays games. So at that point, like, she already has that half of the equation done. But now they have to do the other part, which is, like, actually be able to properly organize this and be able to get the hype going for somebody like Shay to get invested into tournaments like this. So that being said, like I've said earlier, Shay doesn't really have a background when it comes into this. But Brinton, you and I kind of go into our background of what we have watched in esports up until this point and kind of our overall feel of it. I'll go ahead and go first because I've kind of given yours a little bit. Primarily, when I started up, I went into Blizzard esports. And when people think that, they think StarCraft. I watched a little bit of that, but primarily what did it was the introduction of Heroes of the Storm, a little bit of Hearthstone. Actually seeing, like, metagame Hearthstone is kind of a sight to see, especially if you get the right players doing it, because it can be a methodical chess-like process. But what really did it for me in Blizzard's sense was the introduction of the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Because around that time, I was playing WoW, and Mythic Dungeons had just barely been introduced. And so what this basically is so in World of Warcraft, Shay, there are dungeons. And you take a group of 5 to go in and take care of them and take care of the bosses inside of it. But when it comes to a Mythic Dungeon, which is the hardest difficulty, you then have these keystones that require you to finish the dungeon, but faster. So, like, you have to beat it within a certain time frame, kill a certain amount of enemies, and the higher the keystone that you get, the bosses will increase in difficulty in that regard. So you could actually have bosses that can then get abilities that just destroy the party. And so you have to be able to adapt to that. So I really got into that in Legion, and I'll be honest, I still watch it, even though I recently canceled my WoW account. But the biggest thing that I've watched on esports, which is probably, I think, honestly, where Shay would go, is the fighting game scene. because the fighting game tournaments have been getting a lot of headway in the last few years. Specifically, the Smash community has gotten a lot of that. And I also know that Mortal Kombat 11, when it came out, got a lot of esports attention. In specific, when the... Is it all just called Ultimate now? Is it... Yeah, it's all called Ultimate with all of the characters that have come out. So now that it's fully complete, like, that's the big tournaments that Warner Brothers and NetherRealm Studios have sponsored. And that's really where I've gone with a lot of it. I like watching fighting game tournaments because I grew up in the arcades. And we held fighting game tournaments there. So, like, people would play on Street Fighter 2, and there would be a prize pool, which was usually like a full pizza or something. And we would fight to see who wins, kind of thing. So that's, you know, it's a nostalgic thing for me, but primarily my stuff is the Blizzard stuff as well as fighting game tournaments. So I watch a lot of retro tournaments like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but I also watch new stuff like King of Fighters 15 and Guilty Gear Strive. So both of those are in there. Brinton, why don't you go ahead and explain yours?
So, mine experiences with esports have been primarily the Activision Blizzard scene. I got into it when I had attended BlizzCon in 2016, and I remember sitting in the Overwatch arena because Overwatch had just barely come out.
Yep.
Just, you know, Overwatch was only 6 months old.
Mm-hmm.
6 months on the market, very new.
In fact, that arena was the answer to, what is it called? The League of Legends arena, where they did all the major tournaments for Riot. So, yeah.
Like, Ana was just barely a new character. They had just announced Sombra earlier in the day. Like, that's how fresh and new Overwatch still was. I was introduced to Heroes of the Storm at the time, watched StarCraft just for a brief moment, and then the year after that is when they announced the Overwatch League, which I was super excited about. I thought it was going to be really cool to watch. Watched the first inaugural year. I'm still a huge fan of the LA Gladiators, and primarily because one of my favorite colors is purple, and I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did kind of take a Lakers aesthetic, didn't they?
They did, but that's ultimately besides the point.
Yeah.
I ended up really loving, like, I loved watching esports primarily because it helped me learn how to play these games better.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was playing with, at the time, my husband, I was able to stand on my own 2 feet and be able to play the game properly, play my role correctly, because getting yelled at by my ex-husband wasn't improving any sort of gameplay, and I didn't like playing by myself.
Yeah.
So I can say that I would love to watch other forms of esports like the fighting games. I would definitely love to watch more Nintendo. However, they don't, like, most of their live tournaments are usually during the day when I'm at work, and
Yep.
it's usually during 3. Other than that, I don't really know how else to watch Nintendo esports because they don't really stream them live. But that's not the point of the question. The question is, most of the esports that I've engaged with has primarily been with Blizzard games that in turn have allowed me to improve my own gameplay. Completely forgot that Hearthstone had a tournament because I love card games. They're one of my favorite things in the world, and I should have engaged in those, like, watching those competitions a little bit more.
Oh, you mean like the Hearthstone ones?
Oh,
I mean, like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, I love card games. Like, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was a kid. I played Magic when I was a Mormon missionary. Don't ask me how my mission president thought that was a good idea. Been getting back into Magic a little bit.
Magic the Gathering, that's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, I learned, like, when I was a Mormon missionary, go figure. Would love to learn how to play the Pokemon trading card game, which, thank you for, like, I'm so glad there's an app so I can, like, I've been around with that. I've played a little bit of Hearthstone. There was that Riot game that came out that I was playing for a little bit of time as well.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, though.
Runeterra.
Runeterra, there you go.
Runeterra was Ultimately, like I don't stick around with card games too much because they can be really expensive to get involved with. However, I love watching. I
Yeah.
love watching that has to do with trading cards.
Dude,
So
I've actually I don't know if you've ever come across these on YouTube, but there have been like Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments that get held, and that's great to me. But that's just because Yu-Gi-Oh to me is always reminding me of a wonderful time of a wonderful series that you just love to laugh at. So
I remember Yu-Gi-Oh from the early 2000s, and the game has like evolved insanely over the last two
yeah,
decades. So
it's one of the things that I
it,
like that their app has said, which game do you want to play? Original, this one, because now you have multiple eras where kids have grown up to just this form of the card game. And so I thought that was a great idea for them to just say, you know what? Do you want just Duelist Kingdom rules? Okay, you can have that.
Yeah,
no,
my
that
fiance plays the Yu-Gi-Oh card games.
Yeah.
Like he loves playing Yu-Gi-Oh. Like he's still has all his cards, he still plays them. So there's times he'll like look up and see like what cards are banned, what cards are no longer banned for you to be able to play, like what cards like used to be banned but now they're allowed to be played and stuff like that. So he's like very much invested in like the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, both like physical with the physical cards, and he has a group of friends that he still plays with, and
Wow.
also like with the online
See,
game.
that's a rare thing for me too, because like I used to know as a late teen, like a few places that did like magic groups. But then after I hit my 20s, like those kind of fell apart, and there were no card game tournaments anymore locally to me. That's why like the apps were such an amazing thing. Is like Magic the Gathering Arena and the Yu-Gi-Oh app, where you could still play this game, you could still be passionate about it, but it was a lot more affordable.
Mm.
Because like I was a collector of them. I just like I love the design of the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and so I collected them for the longest time. Uh,
Yeah.
which unfortunately didn't work out. See, I was one of those people who like I remember when baseball cards were a thing, and those things went for lots of money. And turns out Yu-Gi-Oh cards didn't really do that either. So
Yeah, he doesn't really buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards anymore. He just still has the same ones that he still has.
nice.
He just always changes his like playing deck around based on like what's allowed to be played now, what's no longer allowed, like how he wants his deck to actually look and stuff like that. So he's very much invested in that. So he has a group of friends that he got back into Yu-Gi-Oh cards and a group of friends that like loves playing Yu-Gi-Oh. So like he's gone to tournaments at like comic book shops that will hold them or like card stores that have them. So like he doesn't play it very often as much anymore because his friend that he used to play with a lot like moved.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a friend that he used to play with all the time that he's like, oh, such and such is about to come over. We're gonna play Yu-Gi-Oh. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Have fun.
And Shay just had to be like she had to be the crap. What's the Taya of the group? She had to make sure that the heart of the cards was maintained. All
oh my
right,
God,
cool.
beautiful.
All right, so but see, here's the thing. I'm glad that got brought up because Yu-Gi-Oh is an esport, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Magic the Gathering is still an esport. Hearthstone obviously is an esport. The Pokemon trading card game, there are tournaments that still happen for those. They don't necessarily happen at like E3 or anything like that, but they happen at role playing conventions a lot.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of these esports that have been able to find their niches. And before we get into the meat of this, there are successful esports that have figured out how to do this. And the best example that I will give is Sony with Gran Turismo. The Gran Turismo team has found a way to be able to do this esport and be able to encourage that competitive activity, but also have it in a sportsmanlike manner. Because they have been able to do Gran Turismo tournaments for, I want to say, like up at least 5 years. They've been able to bring people out to the Gran Turismo facility and be able to do these tournaments and have them still competitive and still people follow them. And they're actually getting ready to start things up with Gran Turismo 7. So like all of the premier players right now have a build of Gran Turismo 7 so that they can start working on how that works. So like there are successful ones, but the ones that everybody brings up that are always an issue are the Call of Duties, the League of Legends, the Overwatches, the fighting games, and whether or not they can actually get things going. Because these are the ones that people want to see successful, especially games like Capcom that just barely announced Street Fighter 6. And Street Fighter is the flagship of the fighting game community. So at that point, we want to see them succeed. Why? Because that means Killer Instinct can succeed. It means Mortal Kombat can succeed. And so with that, let's go ahead and actually get into the meat of this. There are two primary things that I think can be discussed in regards to this. One of which is the community themselves, because the community does play into this, especially if you want to become the NFL. Because, not only does the audience play a part in that, but also the competitors do. And then the second part is the companies. And we're going to keep the companies at the latter end because they just instituted a bunch of new policies that might actually threaten that. So that being said, with the audience and the competitors themselves, there are tons of competitors that have had controversial stances, controversial statements. As you kind of know, Brinton, the Overwatch League was rampant with them. And Jeff Kaplan and the Overwatch League team, bless their hearts, they tried to keep up with everything, but for every one that they handled, there were 5 new ones. 10 new ones in some cases, especially when they started getting really ban happy. So at that point, you can kind of speak on how this affects things.
Yeah, I would say that, like any sort of game, electronic or physical, that the game dramatically changes when the best people are benched.
Yes.
I feel that is a word that can be used even in.
Well, look at it this way: like, people want to go to see a Chicago Bulls game, and Michael Jordan gets suspended. And this actually does happen, or did happen back in the day. It still does to this day. If their favorite player does get suspended, you will see a drop in ticket sales because people want refunds. They wanted to see their favorite player. They can't because they can't even be there.
Like, exactly. I know that a lot of the bans in the inaugural season of Overwatch didn't happen as often until after, like, going into season 2, season 3, and etc. However, when certain players were swapped out in between matches during like commercial breaks, whatever a commercial break looks like when it was originally on Twitch, like, I was disappointed. Did I turn off the stream? No, I wanted to see if the Gladiators were going to win their rounds of matches and, win during their time slot. However, it was not as enjoyable to play because it was and I'm just going to say this for all intents and purposes. I don't like specifically when I say like I'm a Gladiators fan and somebody's like, well, who's your favorite player? That's where you lose me. Because
I like that actually.
Because 1, I don't care. Yeah. 2, I'm not that cognizant when I'm watching esports. And 3, I just look as a team together as a whole. I've been criticized for this a lot, and frankly, I'm at a point in my life where I just don't care anymore. So, from what I can recall and remember, there were certain play styles and certain people that I really liked playing because they had really, really, really fancy moves. And I primarily play support roles when I play Overwatch. So I always am way more keen and in tune to people who play Moira, as that is my main. That is who I love playing. Yeah, I also like to pay attention to other support heroes that I am interested in learning how to play better. Because of this, like I said earlier, I've been able to improve my gameplay slowly over time. I'm not going to say I'm anywhere near pro level. I'm very much as what audiences would call Shay a filthy casual. I'm super casual.
Look, when it comes to the level of play, when it comes to the highest end players, I mean, everybody looks like a plebeian to them because they've literally, we're talking about players that have studied the game's code and figured out how to absolutely optimize characters like Tracer in like 4 or 5 different situations. So already, nobody's going to compare to that level of knowledge. And for those who are saying, well, no, that's obsession. No, it's necessary. These guys are doing what every NFL football team has done when they boil over their playbook and make sure that they have the right things going, because there's no difference in what happens there. That's what you have to do to succeed. And in this case, it's knowledge of the arena, knowledge of the players, knowledge of your team makeup, etc.
And knowing everybody's play styles. I know that esports definitely get a gigantic drag through the mud of, oh, it's not actual sports. And it's like, no, like it's still teamwork. It's still working on a team. It's knowing the people to the left.
That's why I got in a fight with an esports caster, sorry, not an esports caster, an ESPN radio caster about that a while ago. And I still see him every now and again. I make sure to give him a nice little middle finger.
Oh my gosh. Like, one, that doesn't really surprise me, but to essentially finish what I've been, finish answering the question, moving forward into new seasons of the Overwatch League, I get busy with life, things happen, and I didn't really continue watching the league. I just watching highlights that the LA Gladiators would put up on Twitter. However, just reading over and over and over again, this person's getting fined, this person's getting banned, this thing is happening, that thing is happening, and not just to the Gladiators, but to all the teams in the league, it just starts to become like, so is anybody playing?
Mm-hmm. It really, it became a little bit of an issue, but I mean, I'll flip the other side of the coin here. I mean, a lot of things that were being thrown around in the Overwatch League were specifically things like gay slurs, N-words being dropped all over the place, which, look, it also can affect how the audience looks at you, because, if you're gonna have a favorite team, you want to make sure that they aren't all jackasses. Like they all can conduct themselves in a proper setting, specifically in the Overwatch arena, when they actually do have to be sportsmen at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're professionals, and that's what they need to be. And I completely understand to some extent that trying to keep politics out of the arena, but it's the same thing with like football players kneeling during the national anthem, which we don't have to get into. I know that's like really political. Yet a certain beautiful thing called free speech and that First Amendment right is granted to all those who are playing a very American dominant esport. So at the same time, it's like, how much are we going to punish these millennials who are younger than us and have a very different outlook on like life and the way that they were grown up, and bar them from being able to do something that is very exciting and wonderful and thrilling? Or at least that's how I would look at it. I know a lot of people from the inaugural season don't even play Overwatch anymore.
No, they've since moved on because of changes that happened from after season 1.
Yes,
exactly. Because that's when Blizzard got a little bit more stringent. And yeah, again, we're going to get into this because companies are trying to put an iron fist down, and it is going to be a problem in the long term. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, ultimately, the last thing I wanted to say, Adam, is that you are very right. There are two sides of the coin here when it comes to the Overwatch League and everything that has happened with the Overwatch League over the course of the last several years. It has not made me want to watch the league for multiple, both things that Blizzard has done, things that players have done, controversies with certain casters live in the show, and it's just very evident that there is a lot. Well, I mean, look at the lawsuits against Blizzard right now. None of that, just seeing that alone, everything that has been happening with the Overwatch League really shouldn't be as much of a surprise anymore. It just sheds light of, oh, gotcha.
Mm-hmm. So, Shay, actually, Brinton brought up an interesting point, because I know that you've watched your share of sports. You've watched a little bit of the sport ball. But when you see something like that, when you see people kneeling at the national anthem and all that, I mean, yes, it's a political statement, but in your like, taking politics out of the equation, would you consider that something to be allowed? Because I mean, it's just, if it's just kneeling, I mean, you could still make the argument that it is, at least to some extent, sportsmanlike conduct. I think it gets a little bit worse if you, say, had the same person kneeling who was flipping middle fingers everywhere. But to my knowledge, that's never happened. So at that point, like, going into that, having at least some level of sportsmanlike contact, you would probably want to have this from team sports or even individual sports, right?
Yeah, you would just have to determine like what would be considered like sportsmanlike conduct.
Okay.
Because like even if like if someone is making a political statement, if they're not doing anything that's like causing an uproar, then it's kind of like, okay, well, they're really not doing anything. Like, yeah, it's probably gonna ruffle some feathers. Like,
Yeah.
sure. But it's not like they're hopping in the stands, punching anybody out, cursing out like any of the people that are in the stands.
Yeah.
Then I can see that being an issue with like sportsmanlike conduct. Like, for example, if they're putting their hands on another player, but if they're doing something silently in a protest, but they're really not harming anybody, me on a personal level, I don't mind. I don't think that that has anything to say about sportsmanlike conduct, because that has nothing to do with them like physically harming another person or causing another player to lash out at them, because we've all seen it in like sports like football, basketball, when players get into each other's faces and all of a sudden, like, you know, it causes an aggravation. But if someone's doing something and no one's clearly aggravated, but people are just more so in a confused state or aren't for sure like what exactly is happening until like later on after whatever has happened or the sports has been broadcasted, then people get a more understanding, and then the uproar happens. To me, that still doesn't in any way affect the sport in any way. The sport is still going to go on if you do some sort of political statement, such as the kneeling. The football was still played that day. Nothing happened.
Sure.
That to me isn't like an issue, but when it gets to like you being aggressive and you putting your hands on another player or your hands on a spectator whom is there because you didn't like what they said, then that's where there could be an issue.
Yeah.
But even then, I have to say that even then, that's when you have to look at both sides, because you have to think about like, how aggressive though was that spectator? Yeah. Did they say something so out of pocket that set somebody off? Like talking about someone's kids, that's going to set off any parent to like lash out, and they're not going to care where they are or what's happening, because that's something that shouldn't be discussed or shouldn't be talked about. Yeah. But when you have like, or like if you're a player and you get a drink thrown on you for absolutely no reason because someone didn't like.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the first thing that came up to me was, do you remember the Ron Artest incident?
Yes.
Yeah. So, did you know this one, Brinton? Just to bring you up to speed.
No.
So
no, just so many words.
She actually explained to me, or she actually kind of explained it. So Ron Artest was a forward, I think, for the Indiana Pacers. And
he had a drink on him.
That's a bad game, yes?
Yes, basketball.
Okay.
So
sorry.
At that point, he was on the... I can't remember which quarter it was or anything like that, but he was on the bench. And one of the more ardent fans of the opposing team was heckling him from like 3 rows behind. And ultimately the heckling, you know, like players deal with heckling all the time. But this actually escalated because he took his beer can or beer bottle, I can't remember which, and threw it right at the back of Artest's neck.
It was probably like the cup, because I don't think at sports they sell like bottles anymore.
I can't even remember, because I think they even said he was bleeding.
They threw something at him and it caused this huge fight. Like, honestly, if you go on YouTube, you can actually watch the entire fight, because it broke out into a brawl.
Dude basically jumped 2 rows to get at this guy. And eventually they did. They actually ended up in like a legitimate fist fight. And the interesting part about this from a sports conversation is, so technically when you listen to this, Brinton, both people are at fault, right? Mm-hmm. But the only one that ultimately got punished out of it, at least to my knowledge, was Ron Artest, because he was at an NBA-sanctioned game, and so he got a huge fine, and I think suspended for like a quarter of the season. Him and the other player that came to his defense. So that happened, but the heckler like didn't lose his season ticket or anything like that. I might not know the other end of that, but that was a big deal back then. Because like I see it from both sides. The heckler was an asshole, but so was Ron Artest because of the way he responded. And so at that point, I can understand the NBA's perspective on why they suspended him. Because that's just not expected. And there have been some real asshole players that have never raised a hand against hecklers. They've just never done it.
Yeah.
So
but you have to have.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But you have to have like this sense of like, has to be a sense of respect though. Like, I get that everybody gets heckling, and I'm sure like if you're heckled, fine. But words are one thing. But getting physically touched is another, especially when you in no way provoked it. And then that is where, for you, yes, as a player, but also you as a spectator, there has to be an understanding of what you do not do in a sports setting. Like, you cannot physically put your hands on another player, whether it is you physically touching them with your hands or using an object that is in your possession and throwing it at them. You should not be able to do that. So in that instance, my personal opinion, I get Ron Artest probably shouldn't have punched the man and started a whole out brawl. But I also, as an understanding, just as a person, not just as a player, I know for me for a fact that my mom has said to me in school, when I was in school, if someone can talk about you all they want, but if they put their hands on you, you better swing, because no one should be putting their hands on you. And he reacted as, to be honest,
I think
any of us would have reacted. Too. Yeah, and he was right about that. He's like, who wouldn't react like that if you get something thrown at you or poured on you and you did absolutely nothing
like
to
I said,
warrant
the biggest
it?
thing I remember from that was he was cut from it.
Yeah.
So like that's why I'm thinking it was either a can or it was a beer bottle. And it's like that's too far. If it was like one of those beer cups that gets handed out now, that's fine because like that's not going to cause any damage. But this guy was bleeding at the end of it.
Yeah. So there should be an understanding within both spaces of like, as a spectator, what your behavior should be, and as a player within a sports arena, whether it's esports or an actual sport, what your behavior is of what you can and cannot do. But also for the people who are judging, like whatever happens, if something happens to that extent, having an understanding of like what's just going to be, unfortunately, I hate to say it, human nature of okay, like when you're in school, like, and you get into a fight with another kid, what happens when you go to the office? Yes, you guys are both in trouble, but they look at who was the aggressor. And in this case, who started the fight in the first place? And what was the reaction of the other person due to them starting said fight? And if that's the case, then it's like, okay, well then, if that's the case, then Ron Artest, you're not in the wrong because you reacted in a way any logical human being would have reacted.
The only thing he was wrong of was because I remember the official thing was unsportsmanlike conduct. And the only reason he got that was because, you know, when you become an NBA player, when you become an NFL player, you agree to conduct yourself in a specific manner. Like they all fill out that same agreement, code of conduct. It's all part of their contracts that they will conduct themselves. I think it's because you're held to
a
that's what got
higher standard.
Because everybody sided with Artest in that regard.
Yeah, because I think is what it is. It's like you're held to a higher regard because for you as the player, you're in your professional setting.
Yep.
Just like if you're like a retail worker and you get into it with a customer, like that's your place. That's so you're supposed to be professional, even though you're probably seething. And as someone who's worked in retail, I completely have sided with employees where I'm like, yo, I get it. Like that wasn't on you. Like that was definitely on the customer, but you have to conduct yourself in a particular manner so that you do not like lose your job.
Dude,
even though
we all I'm guessing have like horror stories when we worked in retail environments and like that. One of the things that happened to me when I was a van driver for Amazon is this was the height of the pandemic, so we had to make sure that we were wearing masks out there and everything like that, especially in the area that we were at. It was basically like if you weren't wearing a mask like exactly on the nose where it needed to be, you would get consequences in that area. And the perfect example I'm going to have is I had my mask down because I had been holding up a weight set that I was having to drag up 30 steps in Cottonwood Heights, and so you know where that's at, Brinton. You know what I'm talking about. This woman got so pissed at me because my mask was below my nose because I was holding the weight set. She literally took a little saucepan of boiling water and was going to throw it on me because of that. Because of the fact that my mask was down below my nose. And it's just like, okay, at that point, yeah, even though you want to sit there and go, are you crazy, lady? What the hell? No, you still have to conduct yourself properly. Because they will call somebody looking to sue somebody.
Yeah.
And
I've been yelled at in customer service.
Yeah.
Not customer service, but in retail. I used to work for Apple retail. So the store is always busy. And I actually worked as a technical specialist where we would fix people's products. So that was where at the height.
You were on the Genius Bar, is what you were.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And I worked there for, I worked there for about 4 years before I left. So the stories I have, like, I've been yelled at.
Everything's
been,
your fault,
cursed
basically.
at. Yeah, everything's your fault. Even as just a sales associate, like, I was yelled at. And because of the fact that I was a woman and I'm a woman of color in tech, I already had, like, people coming in there, number one, asking to speak with a male, speak to somebody else that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I would, to be honest, whenever they would say, I want to speak with a guy, I would just grab another female just to piss them off even more. Because I'd be like, you want to speak to somebody else, but this is all that's available.
Okay.
Everyone else is busy. You want to wait. But, so yeah, I had been screamed at. I've been cursed at. I've had people get in my face. I've had one instance where I did yell back at a customer because I wasn't having it that day. But, so, I understand, like, as when you're in your place of work, sometimes you do have to conduct yourself in a very much different manner than you would if you were outside of work.
Especially when we're talking about, in the cases of the NFL or the NBA, where I don't know how much detail either of you know this, but like I've had to learn a lot since I live in a sports radio state, and so like we have to know all this conduct if we even so much as think about doing it. I mean, the players are held to a certain code of conduct. The casters or the radio broadcast associates are held to a higher standard. So, like, if you're a local guy and your team wins, believe it or not, this is actually ethics. You cannot make any statement lording it over the other team if you're interviewing their players. You can't do it. Because it's considered it's not unsportsmanlike conduct, but it's something similar to that in that bracket, where you're basically considered to be unsportsmanlike in your conduct with them. But that's how industries like the NBA have been able to make it work, is that they hold everybody to that standard. It's one of the things I find interesting. We brought up the Ron Artest incident. That was when, if you were seeing, because I remember this didn't happen to the guy, but we then started seeing a bunch of states then enacting actual rules and policies for season ticket holders. And it didn't exist here. I know that much. Like, if you wanted to get a Jazz season ticket, you were held to no standards. Because you already paid for it, right? But then there became a list of rules. Like, you can't do this, you can't do that, because this, at this point, they also wanted to cover the player's ass and basically say, like, because guess what happened right after this? Season ticket holder tried to sue Ron Artest. And so this was actually to help cover the asses of the players so that they couldn't get sued for millions and millions of dollars, because any heckler is going to do that kind of thing. And so that's when we had those rules. In fact, the funniest part was that was when the Holy War in our local area had rules for that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Put together a bunch of people from Salt Lake City and a bunch of people from Provo who already in their own sense are a little crazy for those who don't live in Utah. Together in like
they
contained
love their Jello. We'll just say that.
Oh my Lord. Put a bunch of liberals and conservatives into an arena, and it's like like, I don't care for, well, actually, I don't mind the University of Utah. It is where I would like to go do my graduate degree in the far future. However, I'm not a huge American football fan, but I do know that I'm going to stay indoors, barricaded, in the event that there's like a full-on state.
Nobody's gonna hold that against you. Like when BYU and U of U face off in either football or basketball, like that's when all the plebeians basically hide in the basement because anything can happen.
Yeah,
because sensible people immediately become rabid dogs.
It can be a calm evening or it can be a really chaotic evening. It can go either way, and it is
where you're at.
In fact, I can't even remember when the last Holy War was, but that's not the point.
It's a consistent thing. Like even down where I live, if it's the funniest thing is like you actually will have like 10 U of U flags, and then if there's so much as one on that neighborhood, give it a week and that'll be gone, and replaced with a U of U flag because they don't want any trouble, kind of thing. You know, it's just a thing that happens. But we're digressing.
That's like
really
in the Bay Area. I mean, that's like in the Bay Area. It's like we have like the Raiders and the 49ers. So like for the football, it was always Battle of the Bay.
Yeah.
Anytime they would go head to head. And they actually stopped Battle of the Bay for at least a good few years because every time Battle of the Bay happened, it was always fights between Raiders and 49ers
LA riots because of them, if I remember correctly.
No, not with Raiders and the 49ers. Not with Raiders and the 49ers. It would just be fights that would happen like during like tailgate.
I can't remember who it was, but like it was the Lakers and the Kings or something like that. And I remember it being reported like they faced each other.
You mean the Lakers and the
Clippers? It was a really
Clippers?
close game, and I can't remember who won, but there was riots afterwards because of the last call that happened in that game.
Oh, it could have been the Lakers and the Clippers, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just
LA
because those are two the LA basketball teams. But I know for like in the Bay Area where I'm at, it was always football, and it was always the Battle of the Bay, and it was 49ers versus the Raiders. And Raiders fans they follow their team. You know, that's before the Raiders relocated to Vegas. But when they were where I'm at, it was Battle of the Bay. For a few years, they stopped it because every year they were like, these many fights happened after the Battle of the Bay or during Battle of the Bay because everyone is in the stadium basically shit talking each other, and then it gets too far and people get swung on.
Well, and then what's even worse with a lot of these things, okay, take that and times it by 10, and that's because I'm looping everything back together. That's an esports fan. Okay? They are passionate and loyal to the team that they support or the player that they support. And there's no bigger example of that than the Smash community. I can't remember who did this, but the esports player was like a really well-known Jigglypuff player. And he was hated in the Smash community. I think he's still hated even to this day. And I remember one grand finals they did where somebody took I think it was like a ceramic turtle or something like that, and they threw it at his head.
Oh my lord!
Yeah, I think it was like a ceramic turtle, but this guy actually flipped out, and for good reason. Like this thing could have seriously done some damage to his head, and
he could have gone.
And I remember, like, he went into a full-on meltdown because somebody did that, and everybody blamed him for being whiny. And not one person blamed the audience member who threw that out. So, like, that's how crazy things can get, and that's why I think that this is actually a good discussion to have, is like, yeah, the players need to conduct themselves properly, but damn does the audience need to as well.
Yeah, because like you can't do that to somebody.
No.
And then and to me also, you as a what's it called, a player, if you react a certain way because of what an audience member does to you, to me you should not be shamed or called names because you reacted. And the only thing, like if someone does say something to you, then your response can be, what would you do if someone threw something at your head that could have done damage, whether like really like injured me a lot or could have killed me due to the strength of which they may have thrown it? Like what Like, what would you have done? I'm sure you wouldn't have just sat there and kept playing your game. You would have been upset.
Well, this was after the game. So, like, the winner had been decided. It was the guy. And that's why the turtle was thrown at him. So, at that point, it's just like, okay, dude, you are going to create... Like, this is not unsportsmanlike conduct anymore. That's assault. Right there. And even like the NBA and the NFL go, okay, as long as, we'll consider this unsportsmanlike conduct, but if you commit an actual act like assault with a deadly weapon or whatever, we're going to hand you over the cops. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's how we have to cover our own ass in that regard. The guy in particular that I was talking about was Hungry Box. That was his name. Juan Manuel de Biedma, I think is how you say his name. But yeah, he was a well-known Jigglypuff player, and he has been just hated in the Smash community because he picked Jigglypuff, who for the longest time was a never-used tier. It was like if you picked Jigglypuff, you were bad, kind of thing. Like that's how the connotation was, and he did it, and he was winning tournaments with Jigglypuff, and so that's where a lot of his ire came from. So in that case, yeah, the audience needs to be able to be better contained, especially if you're going if you're going to throw shit at people, if you're going to try and sneak up on them from behind, which has also happened at Street Fighter tournaments, yeah, you should get kicked out. Bottom line, you should not even be at those events anymore. And that is definitely something I know that Evo has had a major problem. And that to bring Brinton and Shay up to speed, Evo is like the mecca of fighting game events, or it was for the longest time. This is where you go to be recognized as the best in the featured games of that. And so like Street Fighter was always featured there. Mortal Kombat got featured there a couple of years. Dragon Ball FighterZ. If you wanted to be called the best, you went there to be able to do it. So like if you're going to have audience acting that way, yeah, that's going to be a bit of a problem. But let's kind of get back into the players. So I already said, like, okay, we haven't had really like Ron Artest levels of incidents, but as we know with the Overwatch League, you can have N-bombs and you can have gay slurs and gamer words all over the place. Those happen on Twitter and got consequences for it. They got consequences. The Smash community, they deal that shit out like it's candy. And since Nintendo's not officially involved, because Nintendo's a family company, and they have disavowed the Smash community so fast, and for good reason, because this crap happens on the daily in the Smash community, so much so that we've also had a lot of controversies that have happened around the Smash community in the last year or so, specifically around inappropriate behavior towards fans. And so I wanted to bring this up too. So we've kind of discussed, like, kneeling in there, making a political statement, as long as you're not violent about it, that's sportsmanlike conduct. However, having inappropriate relations with a fan that's younger than you, are we in agreement that that's also inappropriate conduct?
It's 100% inappropriate conduct.
There were 7 prominent Smash players that were busted for that in 2021.
Oh,
and
wow.
All of them were taking advantage of either a fan of the opposite sex, or in, I think, 3 or 4 of them, the same sex. So at that point, yeah, we're talking significant divides. So like, player was in their 20s and fan was in their early teens. So at that point, yeah, we need to kind of stop that too, I would think, wouldn't we?
No, I would completely agree. This is kind of where my expertise kind of plays into effect, being a social worker. Like, that's an adult, and
Yeah.
that's a child. And from my understanding of children and the way that children grow up, their thought processes, the way that they interact with the world and their environment, it doesn't matter what age you are. The biggest thing that children immediately learn is that an older person, a grown-up, an adult, however you want to call them,
Yeah.
they look at the grown-up as the person that they can trust. They're going to protect them. They're going to keep them safe. They're going to make
Or in
sure
the
that
case of a player, they are the person they idolize. These are the people that play our game the best.
Yes. And I think that's also very important to note to keep this in context of the conversation we're having. And so when there is that violation of trust, that violation of idolization, that violation of an adult who should be protecting me is now coming onto me in a way that as a child I do not understand, especially in the United States of America where sex is not really something that gets properly.
It's way more puritanical here than it is in the rest of the world.
It starts to become a problem. It starts to become a thing called grooming. It starts to become a thing where you're creating trauma in an individual who is under this perception of they're the adult, they're the grown up, they're the person I idolize. They cannot hurt me because they're supposed to protect me until they don't.
Yeah.
Well, and primarily, like, because I already have like one person just texting me on this. This is one of the primary reasons Nintendo will not get involved with the Smash community, is because they literally looked at this misconduct and went, there is nothing we can do to even quell this, because we would have to take just absolute control, and Nintendo is more concerned with what happens on their shores than on U.S. shores. I know that they've actively condemned them, but this is what, like, I know a lot of people go, well, this would all be fixed if Nintendo just took charge of the Smash community. No, it wouldn't.
I mean, I would almost argue that it would make things worse, just with it being very much a very family-friendly entertainment company.
Yeah.
And these games are to spark, what's the word I want to use here? Just like appropriate play, fun play, just like
I mean, bottom line, Smash is a kid's game. That's that's who it's built towards.
But wasn't that...
Go ahead, Shay. We've interrupted you like 3 times.
No, it's fine. I think for me, like, granted, I don't agree with a grown adult dating or attempting to date someone who is a minor. But
neither do I.
I don't agree with that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think of like sportsman-like behavior, you're thinking of everything in the context of the sport itself. Like if you're following by the rules. So wouldn't, like, if a player is deciding to date a fan that's obviously younger than them, that's just a whole thing of like just your own personal moral values. Like that has nothing to do with the sport. Like that doesn't have anything to do with like sportsman-like conduct.
But the reason that it does affect them, and I actually do kind of agree with this end of the esports angle, is like, you know, when those players' code of conduct come in for NBA or MLB or anything like that, one of the unadhered to that is in those contracts is like, you will conduct yourself as a law-abiding human being, kind of thing, and so that's how they kind of play it here. And in the case of these guys, it's not necessarily that they're engaging in relationships with these younger people. In fact, in a lot of cases, they're not in relationships. They are deeply hiding the fact that they're involved with these people. And so they actually go, like, this isn't necessarily dating them. This, kind of like how Brinton was saying, this is grooming them, where you actually are trying to, in one particular case, where a female Smash player by the name of Senpai, I want to say, she actually was she was engaged in a relationship with a young boy that was about 14 at the time. And she went out of her way to make sure that there was no evidence of this, including telling the 14-year-old boy to delete any private messages that were shared between the two of them. Otherwise, quote, she would leave him. And so she would use that as basically a way to kind of hold that over him, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like a power. There's a power imbalance there.
Exactly,
because she has a lot more fame compared to him, especially because she knows how much he probably looks up to her as not just a fan, but also as a
Yep.
potential love interest.
And this was one of the times where I actually kind of agreed with the esports community when they kind of ousted her from it.
Yeah, they should have.
They should have done it, but I remember so many people actually coming out and basically saying, "No, you shouldn't really have done this because it's an older woman going after a younger guy. I mean, that's the ideal fantasy, right?" No, it's still inappropriate.
Not when they're under the age of 18.
Yeah, I hate hearing this discussion when it happens with like where you find out about a female school teacher taking advantage of a male student and that argument comes into play. It's the exact same principle if the genders were swapped around, because it's just as damaging. It's just as inhibitive towards that person's life and that person's understanding of life. So when she got properly ousted, and then you had that backlash saying, "Oh, it's not a big deal." No, it totally is, and she had every reason to be kicked out of the Smash community.
Oh yeah, I agree with someone being like kicked out, like if they find out about, something like that happening, and not conducting, basically doing something illegal that's against the law, like automatically. And I guess that was the only reason why I was like, is it considered unsportsmanlike when you're not in the context of like.
There was the grooming aspect that was happening there, so it's kind of a difficult thing, but. Part of that sportsmanlike conduct is that you are adhering to the laws that you live in, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what I was trying to point out, because I know NBA players have to do that, and sometimes they don't agree with the laws.
Yeah.
I love, especially the ones that if you can't get yourself on a professional NBA team or NFL team, sometimes you have to go international. And the contracts are different because that's basically considered a minor league. And so the expectations are different, and there's been lots of problems that come from that, of them violating a U.S. law, but it technically isn't a law in Italy or in Korea, kind of thing. So, I mean, that's a whole other slew of problems that can happen there. But
yeah, I guess I was just looking at the definition of like sportsmanlike conduct, and a lot of times the definition is like within the context of the actual sport. So when it comes to like someone who plays it and then they're deciding to date their fans, that's a whole nother issue. Like that's outside of the realm of the actual sport itself. That's just an issue within the community that just needs to be resolved like by the law.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where like if they're both consenting adults, then there's no problem there. And if anybody gives blowback because of it, that's their deal. It's not necessarily a violation of any unsportsmanlike conduct. They're both following the law, kind of thing. So that plays into it.
Ultimately, I feel that the biggest issue and concern, and why people, I'm not gonna say nitpicky or just a lot more vigilant on this, is because when you become part of a team, like a physical team or an electronic team, you automatically become part of a business. You become part of a plan that's very publicized in their individual ways.
Yep.
And when you are engaging in this misconduct, it starts to put a very bad stigma. It starts to put a stain on the brand in which they work for. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there are CEOs, board of directors, and like very rich white men who want to stay rich. And so they have
to... also there's a varying version of that, because just as much as the NBA is an organization, so are the teams. And so in a lot of cases, like the NBA might not act on inappropriate conduct, but the owner of the team might, because it is a hot button issue that's going on in their area. And so at that point, you can have different tiers of that happening, and it still makes sense to do it.
It's essentially, it just all boils down to making sure, like, there are people who are running a business, and these businesses survive on how much money they're making. If they're not making, the businesses stop being businesses. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, it's all fueled by, am I making money?
Okay.
And at the end of the day, am I making money? Yes or no?
Yep.
Yeah, you have to keep your record like squeaky clean. It's kind of like even like when you look at like a musical group, if one person does wrong, then it makes the whole group look bad,
Yeah,
even if it's just that one person that did something wrong, but they're like, "Hey, that's making all of us look bad." So you need to,
agreed.
you know, straighten up or do something. The
So
difference with esports, you can kick them off.
exactly.
Let's see.
So at that point, the we could kind of get into the next little bit of this, which is like, okay, so we've covered there are clear ways when you're breaking the law, you shouldn't like that. You should still be held to that standard and be able to handle that. Now we can get into the one thing that affects fighting games probably the most. And I also will say, since COD is technically an esport, I think even Fortnite has become an esport now.
Fortnite.
This has been a hot button topic in the esports community: trash talking. And here's where the divide happens: is should it be allowed?
So when you say trash talking, are we saying
I'm getting into it?
Oh, you're getting into it. I apologize.
So trash talking, in the sense that we're talking about, is you know, a lot of people like to bring up the N words and the gamer words and the gay slurs and everything like that, but a lot of the trash talk that in particular happens, some of it doesn't even involve that. Sometimes it's just a bunch of F-bombs getting dropped. And on top of that, depending on the competitor that we're talking about, some will isolate it to just the person. To just the person that they are facing, because that's the person they have to beat, right? Others will then try to mock the community that is formed around said player in order to inflame them, and therefore try to get some kind of massive flame war happening that maybe might have some repercussions for that player. And that's where the debate has kind of happened, is whether or not trash talking, particularly between the two competitors, should that be allowed anymore when you are a player of a major esports team. Now, I will just get, before we get into yours, I'll kind of give my opinion and let you guys kind of branch off of it. I am personally not against trash talking when it comes to this aspect. Why? Because I grew up with players that did this all the time. I mean, I don't know if Brinton specifically knows this, but I'm an NBA fan, and I remember the animosity that happened between one Karl Malone and one Charles Barkley. Both were very inflammatory characters in the NBA, and both very much hated each other and had to face each other a lot since they were in the Western Conference together a lot of the time. And so at that point, they trash talked quite a bit through the tabloids and everything like that. I think even to this day, now that they are managing, or Charles, I know, manages his own social media, they trash talk each other there too. But it's always been directed directly at that other person. And it's always been in a manner of, like, you can tell that there are rules to it. And by rules, I mean, you don't involve other people's families. You don't involve the fans. You trash talk your playing skill. You suck at playing ball, and here's why you suck, kind of thing. And so we had players back in the day that would do this. And they would, in my opinion, they handled themselves trash talking in a professional manner, where they didn't involve all of that. Unlike today, where if you piss off Sonic Fox's fan base will then get riled up and try to dox you, try to SWAT you, try to send 50 pizzas to you via DoorDash, etc. And so this is where I'm a proponent of it, when it's contained, when it's between the two players, because those two players can have a respect for each other and know where not to go. Where I'm not for it is don't involve any other outside parties, kind of thing. Because when you do that, everybody gets hurt in that regard. So that's my stance on it. I am okay with trash talking as long as you stay within bounds. Now you guys give me your opinion on it. Should trash talking be allowed in esports?
This is a very fine line to walk. Because I agree with everything that you're saying. I feel that trash talking is just a form of I'm your rival, you're my rival.
Mm-hmm.
We know the spoken rules of what professional trash talking should look like. I'm just attacking your ability to play the game and nothing else. And that in turn should then fuel you to play a better game and outplay me. That is, that is what it should be like. However,
what's his bug? Colin McGregor? I mean, yeah, he tends to throw out a lot of shit, but a lot of the shit that he throws out is against whomever is his opponent, kind of thing. I think that's his name, Colin McGregor. Yeah.
A beautiful word here, Adam. The tabloids, which, when it comes to, and I could and correct me if I'm wrong once I'm done with my statement. Before the digital era, it was all written down and printed in the news.
Yep.
There was no such thing as, I'm going to like this, I'm going to post a comment, I'm going to retweet, I'm going to reshare, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It was...
And more importantly, I'm going to delete this 5 seconds later when it gets the wrong attention.
Exactly. It was all self-contained because that's how news and media and conversations happen. They were all in person. We are now living in a digital age where a lot of esports competitors and professionals are those who are in anywhere ranging between the ages of 20 to 30, possibly older. I could be wrong. However, these are people still millennials. The later end of the millennials, where they did grow up with this technology. These things are normal to them. This is part of their culture. And it's not as simple anymore for an esports player to trash talk their rival on Twitter without massive amounts of people coming at each other. Do I think esports players should be allowed to trash talk? Absolutely. But there's no safe way to do it, because then you got esport player 1 fans and esport player 2 fans who don't understand or don't know the unspoken rules of professional trash talking and do stupid crap such as swatting, doxing, then getting private information of the rival and sending 50 pizzas through DoorDash to them. At that point, it starts to become all this illegal crap that goes well beyond the unspoken rules of trash talking. And I feel at that point, it just completely destroys what trash talking is. It completely takes away these two rivals' abilities to attack each other on how they play the game, so that way they are able to improve and master the craft that they're being paid. Well, I don't know how much esports competitors are being paid.
It's not much compared to NBA. I'll tell you that much. It varies between the sports.
Ultimately, they're not growing, because then they're having to spend all their energy now being like, you guys, stop.
Yeah.
What you're doing is not okay. Because going back to the conversation that we had previously, they're being idolized. So they may be listened to. However, there's going to be those radicals in the group of fans who are like, you don't know what you're talking about anymore. And it's like, actually, I do know what I'm talking about, because I do this for a living and get paid to do it for a living. What are you doing?
Yeah, but there is that fine print that has to be considered. We don't live in the era where just the tabloids are conveying these statements. They can convey themselves via Twitter, via Reddit, or whatever. And so those are things that have to be considered. And more specifically, I think the legality of them needs to be considered on the part of Trash Talk Party A. Let's put it that way. Are they responsible, or is the guy who sent you the 50 pizzas responsible? And at that point, I would say you need to hold the guy who sent the 50 pizzas responsible.
Yeah. Do tabloids exist? Of course, they do exist in print. However, the tabloids for electronic sports are going to be electronic. You're not at that point, there's no opportunity for these...
The tabloids in particular are games journalism. And games journalism, they love stirring the pot. So at that point, it doesn't even become a contained thing. They will stir the pot as long as they are able to.
Yeah, and living in a world where you can reshare, retweet, hate, or dislike, love, not love, share, comment, attack, it's a wildfire. Start that
Yep.
spark, and like the mountain is on fire,
Mm-hmm.
or the fields are on fire.
So
I say we live right next to the mountains, and that's just all I know. So
no,
the mountains
I
on.
get it. Shay, your take on trash talking? Should it be allowed?
Are you saying they're trash talking before they start the event or during the event?
Both, because sometimes like we'll have multiple rounds, and so at that point they might begin the trash talking if it's like a big matchup between. So like an example in the fighting game community would have been like Justin Wong and Daigo Umehara, who two players who have faced each other numerous times and have had a respectful trash talking between the two of them, but their fans haven't necessarily been that.
Gotcha. I would agree with trash talking happening before the event. So, like, for example, like how you see with boxing, like they'll trash talk before that, but when they're
Yep.
actually fighting each other, there's really not any trash talking happening that we know of. Who knows what's going on when they're actually in the ring with each other? They could be talking smack to each other and us not even know.
There's a good statement there. There's when to you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Yeah.
And so I agree with that.
Yeah, so I feel like if you're trash talking before the event, whether it's on Twitter or not or whatever, that's fine. You can trash talk all you want. Like, as long as it's like no lobos, talk about nobody family, nobody kids, nobody nothing else like that. Just how they play the game, or even like gloating of like, oh, I'm gonna win this. That's fine. But when it's during the actual event, like while it's actually happening, your mic doesn't need to be on. You don't need to be saying nothing, because at that point, your skills in the game is going to do all the talking at that point. You don't need to be talking any sort of words at that point. Like, you can talk your game of all you want beforehand. And then once you start playing, we really going to see which one of y'all actually have the skills, and if your trash talk actually lives up to what you actually said, or if you were literally all talk and your actual game is trash.
I agree completely. I think that's exactly how it should happen. Like, I honestly think, and this doesn't happen at the tournaments because they're still saying like freedom of speech, freedom of expression is holding that back. But I do think when it comes to the competitors, social media needs to be turned off. And phones need to be turned off because you need to focus. You need to actually focus on the task at hand, and B, just like we don't need anything that can maybe incense or rile the public there, because I actually agree with that. Like if it's outside of that tournament, say what you want, but once that tournament is in play, then it's time for to see whether or not it worked, kind of thing.
That's why I feel at that point. Like...
no, you're good. And with that, we've covered the player portion of this because the players can only do so much, and I think we've actually hit quite a number of good points on that I do think they need to consider in the future. But now it's time to get to the companies. So at that point, there are two major things that I want to hammer home on the policies with these. The first one being that much like... The way that I'm trying to phrase this is simple. With the announcement of Street Fighter 6, so Capcom went in and completely revised their whole esports policy when it comes to approving tournaments, when it comes to approving players, when it comes to approving conduct, etc. They blanketly went over it all and tried to streamline it to be able to make it easier to approve for tournaments, but also be able to cover their own copyrights and everything like that. And in the case of Capcom, it actually shined a wider light on some of the policies that companies like Riot and Blizzard and Activision and EA have been using for a while now to kind of impose their will upon the players themselves as well as the audience. And the biggest one that has gotten a lot of people worried is how they're basically trying to lord over tournaments that they don't necessarily own, but they're basically saying that we can make the rules, not them. So they, in particular, Capcom has this, but we also know these other contracts basically have it of our rule is more law than yours when it comes to the tournament organizers. And the tournament organizers have been doing this for far longer than Capcom has. Far longer than Blizzard has. Like, when it's BlizzCon, that makes sense, because Blizzard's in charge. But these tournament organizers have been running their own rules for the longest time, and in some cases, rules are written vague enough in these statements that Capcom could basically muscle in and say, "No, we're gonna make the decision for you." For example, the one that I'm going to bring up that everybody loves from the new Capcom statement is there will no longer be any, and I quote, excessive yelling by either of the players. So, this is how vague it is. Let's just say, Brinton, you and I just faced each other in a Smash Grand Final. I win. Now, obviously, there's going to be some celebration that's going to happen there, right?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Because of the blanket rule that is being stated here and in its vague statement, all I have to do is this. Ah! And they can ban me from the tournament that I just won.
So, what you're saying is...
They can overrule the tournament organizers, and Capcom can say, nope, this person won.
Well, I was going to make a joke, but what I was trying to say is, in the future, if this actually happens to us, I'll slip you a 20 so I win.
Nice. All right, okay, I'll take that. But, yeah, this is one that we actually found in Blizzard's, and I believe Riot's, is excessive yelling. Now, before people jump down my throat, I know exactly why they put that policy in there. Because this is kind of going into that trash talking deal where some people will get in each other's faces and go, "See, I told you I'd win." And that's what they're trying to stop. But the way that they've blanketly kind of worded it is I can get away with what I just barely said, and I would qualify as violating that rule. And Capcom could therefore override this local run not Capcom. Nintendo could. This is a hypothetical here, but Nintendo could then come in and override that tournament organizer's rules on that, and therefore say, nope, that person's the winner because that person didn't yell. And this is just one example of several where it's a very broad blanket rule that can easily be taken advantage of. Kind of like, I don't know, a certain copyright system that we all have a problem with. Oops. So my opinion on this is very simple. You need to narrow that focus down on what is actually qualified. Because here's the thing. I don't have a problem with people celebrating at the end of a tournament. Like, they've earned it at that point. They've gone through the stressful aspect of not only the preliminaries, but the bracket itself. And you basically, and if you did that for such a stupid reason, there's a reason that people would lash out at you on that, because that guy earned it. And you want to take it away simply because he followed your vague rule. Or he didn't follow your vague rule, basically. So, Shay, what's your take on the excessive yelling?
I mean, it sounds strange. Just on a personal level, it sounds strange.
Yeah.
But on a weirdly, looking at the Capcom's reason for doing it, I guess I understand why. And I guess I understand why they made it broad. And I feel like they made it broad so that there's not really like a loophole. So they're just kind of like, we're just going to cover all of it. No excessive noise at all. And I guess it's just a way of like, if you narrow it down, then you leave room open for people to do a loophole and be like, technically, I didn't do what is stated here. I feel like the only way they would change it is if it would start to like directly not affect them, but like if someone brings up a big enough argument where something happens and there's a big enough outcry, then they might narrow it down. But as of right now, I can understand why they did such a broad statement, because they were like, just broadly, no noise. It's like, wait,
Well,
what?
but here's the primary reason that they did this, and I actually kind of teased to you guys that I was going to bring this up. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I think this is the main reason why they did it. In all honesty, I do think that's the case. Because specifically in like Smash tournaments, this is a widely known thing that happens. So let me put a focus on this one. So I'm pretty sure people know of situations like this where it is a Smash salty moment or a rage quit. So we'll just give one or two examples here. And this is what I think they're trying to avoid. You guys can't necessarily hear this, but I'm going to let you guys kind of react to the conduct. Oh, and there you go. There's a rage quit. So that is a tasteful rage quit, but we can have way worse rage quits.
Oh.
I can get that a lot from Iota when I watch him play Wario.
Yeah, I mean, Iota is the embodiment of Wario in a way. Oh, okay.
We need one with an actual camera so you guys can actually see this. Okay, so there we go. So we'll skip ahead to this one. This will give us a post elimination rage quit. All right, and oh, dang it. That's not even... I picked the wrong video for this. Holy crap. I thought I had the right one, but I did not. Let's see. There we go. We'll do this.
One more time! No! The Undertaker!
Oh, it's
That's not just you, that's them.
Yeah.
Like every single match of Melee is a battle of wills.
Show another one.
Ooh, Carso slaps his knee. Shy City knee slappers. Chicago famous for slapping their knees.
By the way, that's the previous guy.
He spiked his controller so hard.
Dude, that's...
Did you...
So there you go, guys. There's an example just to kind of give you guys a perspective. So things like controller spikes and rage quits still tend to happen. Now, in Smash, they happen a lot more prevalently. But in Street Fighter and in Mortal Kombat, they still happen from time to time because you'll get a newbie who isn't necessarily used to public image or anything like that. And so I think that's the targeting they're trying to do with the excessive yelling. They're trying to avoid stuff like that. But this is why I kind of have the viewpoint in where I kind of agree to disagree with you, Shay, is like, you need to narrow down that focus so that people understand the meaning behind it. Otherwise, it's just a broad rule that can get abused. But I think that's the intention that's made for it, is they don't want controller spikes. They don't want temper tantrums or anything like that that can easily be caught on camera.
I would have to agree with Adam on this one as well. I super also understand what you have also stated, Shay. Being being someone who studied behavior in college and continues to study behavior in my career, behavior has to be described very specifically. So using a vague term such as excessive yelling, what does excessive yelling look like?
Mm-hmm. And instead, what I would basically say is put a bunch of bullet points right below what is going to violate this rule. And then at that point, put in like controller spiking.
Because without doing so, then you get into the situations like Adam was describing where, oh, I just won this tournament. I literally cannot show excitement. And that is not human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shay, your take on that?
Oh, no, I agree that they need to narrow it down. Like,
yep.
I don't believe that they should have made such a broad way of doing it. I just feel like they did it as a way of just saying, like, look, this is just how we're going to do it. It's just broadly say no yelling.
Yep.
And as far as the whole, like, spiking of the controller is concerned, yeah, people shouldn't do that.
Don't do that.
That is, like, automatically to me, like, that to me is, like, unsportsmanlike conduct.
$60
yes.
out of pocket that's destroyed.
Well, it's not just that, but like I don't care if you destroy your own thing. You could destroy it off camera for all I care.
Sure.
My whole thing is like you could break it with a hammer. My whole thing is like that to me is unsportsmanlike conduct, because that just shows that you are a sore loser. That just shows that you got
if you shatter that controller
mad.
and then a fragment of it scratches the arm of the guy next to you. Like that, that's a bad thing.
It's dangerous to do that.
Uh-huh.
To me, it's like, it just shows that you're a sore loser. If you are going to react like that due to losing, then do not enter a tournament and play at home. Because to me, that is how I've seen, once again, not just kids, but also adults act when they're playing with their siblings,
Especially
or they're
with
playing
Smash, man.
and you're playing just a friendly thing with your friends. I've seen people act like that. But to me, if you're in a tournament setting, you don't act like that. And if you can't conduct yourself like in a way where like you can hold your composure until you're away from the cameras or whatever, and feel free to get mad, trash your room, do whatever once you're outside of the public eye. But if you are there and you lose, shake the dude's hand, say like, hey, GG's, good game, keep it moving. You can be mad, you can be upset all you want.
Yeah, you could throw your slurs all you want, but when you're in that environment, you conduct yourself.
Yeah. Once you're outside of the realms of the camera, or let me just put it even more, like, I guess I hate to say it in a broad sense. Once you're outside of a public space, then be free to be as mad and upset as you want to be.
Yep. That's
once you are outside of a public space.
That's one of the complaints that I don't have about, I can't remember his actual name, Low Tier God. He's a Street Fighter player that is very controversial, and in fact, he actually lost his ability to be able to attend any Street Fighter events because he got into a spat with another Street Fighter player, and it got intense. But the one thing that I could not complain about this guy is that he would conduct himself in tournaments. All of his offenses were on his live stream. That's where he would be the asshole. It was very rare when he would trash talk at the event. In fact, I can only think of one major event where he did that. But as much as I think the guy's an asshole, when the game was done and he lost, he shook the guy's hand, he took his arcade stick, and he went home, kind of thing. And then he bitched about it in the streams, which is what you do.
Yeah, that's fine. To me, like, the main thing, even my mom used to say to me and my brother, if we played a game and one of us got mad due to losing or whatever, or feeling like the other person cheated.
Because that didn't happen to anybody.
She would, she would say, like, this is just a game. Like, it's literally, it is a game. It is not like you are playing Squid Game and your life depends on whether you win or lose. If you lose, you can just start over and play again, or practice and get better and then just play that person again. Who knows? It could be a total fluke that you lost. You never know. Things happen.
Yep.
But it's a game.
I was going to say the same exact thing. I have a very personal policy where whether I'm playing with friends, whether I'm playing with family, whether I'm playing a game by myself, if I find myself getting angry, however you want to define that behavior, like, I'm done. Yeah. Like, games are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be enjoyable. They're supposed to be entertaining. If they're not doing those things, then I'm done. And I do not go back to that for the rest of the night. Well, that's my policy.
It's not just that. It's like, I've played lots of fighting games in my life. And one of the things I've noticed, at least with me and also with people that I play with, is that when you have what I like to call the Goku mentality, which is like, let's fight again. When you have that mentality, fighting game's fun. That's when we're all enjoying, because like you can have those last minute finishes, kind of like what we had when we did King of Fighters 15. When we have those finishes, those are great. But when you get heated, that's when the fun can leave, and that's probably when a break should be taken. Because like with me and my older brother, we love Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And we will play that endlessly, along with friends. But when we bring in a younger person who maybe isn't quite as used to losing and doesn't see a benefit from losing, then at that point, like, we have to institute timeouts and things like that, because that person might need to go get a drink of water, go walk it off, kind of thing. But the purpose here is not to prevent them from doing it, from playing the game. It's to get them to learn that this is supposed to be fun.
I can't tell you how many times, because I've seen my ex-husband spike a controller. Now that I understand the definition from earlier. I've 100% seen him spike a controller. I've seen him like just completely be in total rage playing games, and he still goes. And that started to seep into the way that our son was playing games. And I got to the point where I would be the one to be like, I'm done.
No.
Like, I encourage everybody else to turn off this game. However, I am done playing.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, like this is the point where this ought to be like the perfect example of when not to do this. I'm pretty sure every one of us has seen any one of those videos of a Wiimote going through a plasma screen.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever seen a PS2 controller go through drywall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. My brother from another mother did that, and that was like the defining moment where I'm like, I am not gonna get that angry with video games anymore. Because we pulled that thing out and we still had to tear the controller in half to get it out of the drywall.
Like it's a game, and all you did is you just broke your controller.
Yeah.
Like and now you can't play because you broke your controller. So now it's like, even if you wanted to play again, you can't until you get a new controller. It's just like, like, to me, it's like, what was the reason for you getting so upset? Like, I get you wanted to win. I get that you hated that you lost, but it's a game. And like I said, it's not like your life depends on you winning this game.
So we have one more guideline to go over before we kind of got to wrap this up, because I do want to still try to make sure that this is a short podcast. We've had, Shay, you haven't been here, but I've had a really bad habit of having like 3-hour plus podcasts. Look, I have no problem having those 3-hour discussions, but they are nightmares to edit, and they are nightmares to keep on my hard drive. So I do kind of have to hold that back, but
no, I understand.
Here's one policy that I do want to bring up in defense of the companies. Because, yes, when I think you're being a dictator, I have no problem calling you out on it. However, there's one policy that a lot of people have been getting mad about in that I think that needs addressing. And that is the improper use of Capcom or NetherRealm Studios assets. So they actually put this policy into that contract, is that basically, if you try to use their logo or use their characters in an improper way, that they would be able to come down on you. And a lot of people have taken that as, oh, well, since a lot of these are also conventions, this is Capcom declaring war on Artist Sally. Basically saying that they don't want fan art. They don't want DeviantArt or anything like that existing, and this is just them saying, no, we're being dictators with our intellectual property. And in reality, if you read the policy a little bit better, it actually is, they just don't want anything inappropriate tied to their assets. And what they specifically were targeting is, this isn't everybody in Artist Sally, but there would be 1 or 2 people who would put up their own fan art of, let's just say, Chun-Li doing some very inappropriate things.
So are we breaching the realm of like Rule 43 or just...
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
And what would make that bad is that they would actually, in order to sell it, because in Artist Alley, you guys probably know this right off the bat. Mm-hmm. If it looks like it's officially licensed, you're more than likely to buy it, because it does feel like it has that pedigree. So what these people would do is they would put up said offending imagery of Chun-Li having fun with herself, but in the corner they would put the official Street Fighter V logo in there to make it look official. And so then at that point, then Capcom has a problem, because now you're portraying one of their lead female characters doing very inappropriate things, and it looks like it's officially licensed. So this is one of those ones where I stand with the company, because this is something that should not be done, because that's improper use of that trademark. But also, it's portraying an image of the company that isn't necessarily true. So at that point, I agree with them on it, and I've already been called like a pro company guy, or shill, whatever you want to throw out there. But Capcom has the right to maintain an image when it comes to certain characters. yes, Chun-Li is well endowed. I'm pretty sure Shay could point that out to us. She is very well endowed. But they've always conducted her in a manner that befits a warrior, befits a fighter. And unfortunately, the internet doesn't necessarily agree with that, and Rule 43 rules. And so what all they're trying to do is they just don't want that inappropriate imagery to look like it's official, because it's not. They don't approve of that. They don't even approve when people put Morrigan from Darkstalkers in innocuous positions. Or the one that I actually just barely saw that was kind of disappointing. So I affectionately call this guy Lumberjack Ryu. It's the pre-order skin of Street Fighter V Ryu, where he's shirtless and he has a lumberjack beard. Ergo, I guess the consensus there is that it's hot Ryu.
Well, I mean, slap a beard on any man, and I mean,
especially in his case. I gotta admit, that's hot. But there was actually imagery that went out, I want to say the last month or so, of hot Ryu kind of hinting that he might be dropping trowel and might actually be looking to, do some other things. And Capcom had offense to that, because that's not why they created that version of the character. They created it as a proper evolution to the character. And so at that point, they have the right to be able to say, no, we don't approve of this. And so I don't think it's as much of a war on Artist Sally as everybody else thinks it is. It's more along the lines of, you have to protect your copyright. Sorry, go ahead, Shay.
Oh, no, yeah, I agree. You got to protect your copyright, because you can't have someone making money off of your product, especially if they're portraying it in a way that you do not approve of.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that was most notorious for doing things like this was Square Enix when it came to Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, yeah.
Because I do know that people used to say a lot of times, if you went to a convention and there was anything there that was Kingdom Hearts, they were coming down on you hard.
Especially if it was
a Keyblade. They were like, nope, you can't sell this. You can't do this. This is our IP. This is our property.
I remember people actually trying to sell Sora Riku Yaoi art at Artist Alley's and having the Kingdom Hearts logo on it. Again, that makes it look official.
Yeah.
And they would get hammered by Square Enix, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I think there was even not for sure how true this was, but it was something that I think I saw on YouTube that somebody was talking about, where Square Enix had actually had people at a convention going to people's booths and having them take stuff down, because it was their own legal team, because they knew that people were doing this at conventions, and they were like, we're not going to allow you to do this. So they're within their right to do that, because that's something that they make money off of. That is their copyright. That is their IP. They are within their rights to do that. And even though that us as fans or players might be like, oh man, that really sucks, you have to look at it from a business point of view, that you're like, how would you feel if someone's making money off of your product? You had to work hard to get licensed, or had to work hard to create, and someone else is benefiting off of that. And especially if they're portraying it in a way that you don't want portrayed.
Especially when you have a particular image that you're trying to maintain with that. I mean, Street Fighter has always kind of maintained the fact that, yes, we do have sexy ladies and sexy men on screen, but they're fighters, and that's what we want them to look like. They are the world warrior. They have their own goals. They have there's a character behind this guy with 10 different six packs. I probably didn't say that right. But there's a character behind this woman with a really nice ass, kind of thing. The only reason they have a really nice ass is because they take care of themselves, kind of deal. And it's very clear in that regard. And so at that point, this is just them kind of protecting that, because, I mean, just think of, if you typed in Princess Peach, Zelda, or Samus in there, and half of the fan art that comes up from that... And let's just think that some modder put in a skin in Smash Bros. That looks like, I don't know, I hate to throw this one out, but pregnant Peach. And they take it down. they are totally within their rights to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like it's just like if you're a gamer, and you like do streams or stuff like that, and someone took your stream, re-uploaded it onto whatever they have, are making money off of it, but then are portraying your gameplay in a way that was not at all how it originally was. You would be pissed because you would be like, number one, you're making money off of it,
Yep.
and you're portraying something that's not at all true. So people have to think of it from that standpoint, and I think people don't understand that until they're directly hit by it, and then they're like, wait a minute, now I get it.
So in this case, like, it sounds to me like you both are in kind of agreement here. They are in the right when it comes to this, as long as they keep it that way. But with the other stuff, it's kind of questionable. You do need to kind of outline it. I especially love that in response to Shay, we have RPX in the stream chat, who has basically been asking an honest question. Are you sure that whomever was banning that Kingdom Hearts stuff was Square and not Disney? It's
usually
both.
Square Enix. It was not, well, it's usually Square Enix and not so much Disney, because if you go onto like even like Square Enix's
Disney
site,
attacks the official, like the more official stuff.
Yeah, Square Enix goes after like the Keyblades and stuff like that. Like that's legit. Like their
I remember
stuff like that.
Has anybody here watched Man-at-Arms Restored?
Yeah.
No. So
yes, where he made a Keyblade on YouTube.
No, they made like 3 of them, 3 different versions.
My fiance had me like watch it because he was like, I really want to see this, and so we watched it.
Brinton, this is like a team of blacksmiths that actually get together and try to create weapons that would be in movies or in video games. And in this case, they did like 3 different Keyblades, all of which got hit by Square and Disney for it.
Oh.
And these were like fan requests. So it was just like, they didn't make them to sell them. They made them to, they didn't make them to sell them. They made them to show them that they could, kind of thing. And so that's how they handled it. But yeah, this crap happens all the time.
Yeah, it's probably because they made money off of it.
And apparently RPX is mad at us because we didn't mention the Cloud and Sephiroth Yaoi porn. Yes, that exists.
Oh wow. Yeah, Square Enix and Disney probably went after that guy because he
stuff.
Yeah. I feel like with the blacksmith guy, I feel like Square Enix probably went after him because he was probably making money off of that video.
Yes, the specific one that they got, because one of them was hit by Disney, the other 2 were hit by Square Enix. And they were hit specifically because they monetized it. But thankfully, I think because they actually did go to court for it, they actually did prove that like there was nothing attached to like official branding or anything like that. They made even though these were supposed to be replicas, they made enough variations to them that they weren't the same thing. And also the fact that they thought that they were reproducing them to sell them, and they proved that they didn't.
Yeah, it has to be transformative enough that it doesn't look like the original creator's work. It has to look at least somewhat unique or somewhat different for it to not be like...
Oh, my bad. He actually said it wrong. No, it was not a peep from Square about the Cloud Sephiroth Yaoi porn. Well, probably because Katase and Nomura like it. I mean, I have made the joke for many years that deep down in the basement of Square Enix, there is an altar, and that altar has a big statue of Cloud versus Sephiroth. And whenever they have a new Final Fantasy game coming out, they go down to pray to that because they want it to be as successful as FF7 was back in the day.
Oh my gosh, Adam.
I'm thoroughly convinced it happens. I'm thoroughly convinced. I have no proof of this whatsoever, and that's how I cover my ass. But I'm thoroughly convinced it happens.
Oh my gosh.
wow.
Out of all the things that you've said, my friend, in the time that I've known you and in the time that I've been in your show, I've been able to stand by and I'm like, yeah, I can support that.
That one.
That one's weird for me.
Look, I know it's a little Alex Jones for me to point out that they have a secret basement that has an altar of Cloud and Sephiroth, but hear me out.
I'm gonna go slither into a corner that nobody can see me in now, and just hold my head and face in hands. And
well, at least we can all agree with what RPX just barely said, and that is that Final Fantasy VI was the best of the Final Fantasy games. I would politely disagree, but that's just because 4. But yeah, what was that?
Well, I was gonna say I'm gonna politely disagree because 10 and 14.
Well, 10 and 14. 14 is not officially on my list yet because I haven't played it yet, but 10 is on my list. 10 is on my list because it's just as awesome.
I'll resub to 14 to play it with you when you get around to it.
As long as I can find time for it, man, because like I'd probably be playing the PC version. Does that matter?
I mean, the PC version will play and feel very much like World of Warcraft, so I would recommend.
Well, I mean, would we be able to play together or?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is console connectivity. All right, that was the thing I wasn't sure about, but unfortunately, what was that?
Oh, it's not the point. So moving on.
So unfortunately, we've actually run out of time. So we actually do need to wrap things up. But I love the fact that we've had a great discussion about like not only where esports has been and where the controversies that they're having right now, but also like what they can do to continue to survive. And I do think some great advice has been able to be given to those organizations to be able to survive. My only hope is that maybe one of them listens to the podcast or maybe takes that to heart. But I can never promise that. But I still think this was an awesome discussion. And thank you guys for both being a part of it. And thank also the person who recommended it. This is one I've actually been looking forward to for a long time and making sure that we had not only Shay on, but also having somebody else that could also talk esports with me and be able to kind of answer whatever questions that Shay might have along the way. So that being said, if people want to continue this conversation and be able to reach out to us and be able to ask questions on our positions on specific things, like maybe something going on with like Guilty Gear Strive or with Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Shay, how do they do that for you?
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube and Twitter and everywhere else. So on YouTube, I am Shay Terry on YouTube. On Twitter, I am Shay_Terry. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, I talk about a lot of anime stuff. I also talk about some stuff in K-pop as well.
You've also been handling. I don't think you've been doing it recently, but you've gotten into a lot of fanfic too. So.
I have. I've been into fan fiction for a really long time. I just never really talked about it.
I might have this wrong, but I think you've actually given like tutorials on how to do it. Kind of thing?
Not really tutorials on how to do it, but kind of like my reviews on certain like fan fiction sites that I've used.
Yep.
And like which ones I've liked.
Okay.
Which ones I'm struggling with.
All right, I'm good with it.
But yeah, you can find me on there. I do videos twice a week, usually on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So you can check me out on there. Any of my social medias are also linked in descriptions of my videos. So if what I said for where to find me on social media, you were able to find me, go to a video, click on the links below, and you'll find me.
So at that point, Brinton, this would be the point where you kind of do that, but you really don't have anything for people to be able to reach out to. So should we just give the usual email for any questions?
Yes, I mean, ultimately, and I realize that I've been giving out my wrong Twitter handle. I don't really post to Twitter all that often. However, if you feel the need to follow me and to ask me questions there, my Twitter handle is bvalli, VALLI 30. Or you can contact Drak directly, and I'm more than happy to answer questions in that capacity as well. Yeah. I'm just, I'll say this, I've said this before, and I'll continue to say this again and again and again. I'm just an affiliate. I'm here to supply the content. Without necessarily supplying any of my own. That's just not the direction my life is headed at the moment.
All right. And actually, I think this is an appropriate way to kind of end the podcast on before I wrap things up. RPX asks an honest question. Can you name somebody outside of FF6 who can suplex a train?
No.
Well, I did. Tifa.
Well, I've never played Final Fantasy VI. Sorry.
Yeah, this is a gimmick that you don't know anything about, but there's an ability called Suplex with a martial arts character named Sabin in it, and they actually made it so that one of the boss encounters that you have is a phantom train. It's like the train that delivers the souls of the dead. And they actually worked this out so that he could actually suplex the train. And it's just one of those lovable bugs of Final Fantasy VI that he could actually pick the train up and then throw it back down, kind of like a seismic toss from Charizard in the anime. So,
okay, I would agree.
That's why I say Tifa, because she's basically the Goku of her universe. So,
yeah, I completely agree with that, Adam.
So, Shay, did you have one?
No, because I haven't played like Final Fantasy 6. I forgot. I've only played like one Final Fantasy game, and I never finished it.
Which one?
It was the one they released on Xbox. I think it was like Final Fantasy
15.
I think it could have been 15. It was where
Either-
it was with like
It could have been 13 or 15.
one of the two. All I know is
Were
I
you
got to
playing
a
as a
part where
girl or are you playing as a guy?
you were. Who was I playing? I think you were playing as a guy.
So it might
That's
have been 15.
It could have been. All I know is there was like a part where you had to start playing as the black guy character they have in there. I don't know his name.
Oh,
I just know he
no,
was
this
a black
is
character.
13.
Okay, yeah.
This
So it
is
was 13. You had to play as him to try and beat somebody, and I got frustrated because I couldn't beat them with him, and so
Yeah.
I never played the game again after that.
It's so difficult to get Saz to a point where he can kind of live on his own.
I hated it.
So
I was done. So
I've
after
been
that,
there
I was like, nope.
so many times. Just
So-
like, okay, well, my time with this game has come to an end.
Yeah, I was never a big RPG player.
No, and I totally get it. Like, there are flaws to 13. I like 13, but there are flaws to it.
Oh no, yeah, it was a fine game. I
Yeah.
just got stuck, and when I get stuck on a part of a game, screw it.
Yeah, my sister has the same kind of problem. Like, she played Final Fantasy VII. It was the first Final Fantasy she'd seen ever since the first one. And she got stuck an hour into Midgar and never went back to the game. She always insisted that either me or my older brother finish it. Like, because
Oh my
she
God.
just refused to play the game.
That like makes so much sense. That's like I don't know if you guys had ever heard this story, but the guy that voices Roy Mustang in Fullmetal Alchemist, Travis Willingham, he had said that they recorded the games first before they recorded the series. So when he recorded the game and voiced Roy Mustang, he got a copy of the game and played it. And so he got to the end of the game where Roy Mustang was the boss and he couldn't beat his own character.
Yes,
And he said he got
Yeah.
frustrated and like threw it in his closet and like never played it again. And he's like at conventions, people would tell him, "Oh, it was so easy to beat you," and he would get so mad because he couldn't beat
Yeah,
it.
not only that, but I think it was Vic or one of the other cast members got wind that he had that problem, and so they would constantly needle him as well. That he couldn't pull it. Well, at least I could beat my my character in the video game, and so he was like. I think this is ultimately what led to the whole dead sexy in a miniskirt thing, also with him. So that was a thing. Because Roy Mustang looks dead sexy in a miniskirt.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Anyway.
Sorry, I just need to bring up that story. It was just
Oh,
funny.
no, this is totally fine. And if people want to be able to reach out to me, the best places to be able to do so is on Twitter, @GeekyNRO. I have basically procured that account to be able to help advertise the podcast as well as my individual stuff. So you guys can reach out there. You can also check out my Instagram @Drak2326, where I have actually been very laxed in my duty of posting fart memes and gamer memes and all of that stuff. And I promise you, the way that Bill Clinton would promise, I will get back to that. And I will get back to giving you geeky fart memes. It will happen after I'm done taking care of the kids. And also, if you guys want to be able to leave us feedback or also be able to submit stories or discussions that we can have here, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. But I also want to make sure to advertise this because we now have the means to be able to do it. I'm not sure when we're going to be able to, but I know enough people have been asking, when are we going to be able to do something Bleach related? Because in regards to that, it's always like for the longest time, it's been me and Shay, or me and Brinton had one discussion on a Devil May Cry Let's Play where we were talking about Bleach, but everybody was wondering if we were going to have another discussion on Thousand Year Blood War arc. And it turns out that we actually have a full panel to be able to do just that. So I'm going to try and plan it around a trailer too, to see if maybe we can also discuss that. But who knows? That might be coming down the pike. Or, I don't know, maybe having Shay make a miraculous return to Geek News Movie Night. That might be happening. Who knows? I'm bad at teasing things. But that's okay.
Lord.
But also, make sure to support the RSS feed at geekynro.libsyn.com, where you get everything. You get all the Geek News movie nights, you get these roundtable discussions, you get the podcast itself, as well as Geek News Anime Night and Geek News Marathon Night. And guys, I have no problem telling you this. This is another thing that's come with a 1,000-year Blood War arc, is whether or not I can make a Geek News Anime Night work where the three of us go episode by episode into the 1,000-year Blood War arc. I don't know if we can, but we'll see what can be done. It just depends on how busy our schedules are. And in case you guys didn't hear this at the beginning of the stream, Shay has a lot of weddings coming up. So I don't know. We'll see if we can make it work. It's definitely going to be a difficult thing to do, but I think everybody on this panel would be on board with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so there you go, and that's going to go ahead and do it for us. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this wonderful podcast to be able to get yet another discussion out of the way. Thank you so much to Brinton and to Shay for joining me in this discussion on esports. And of course, we will see you guys next time for the next Geek News Reviews and Opinions. So for myself, for Shay, and for Brinton, we will see you guys next time.
Oh my god. I do like a good cheese.